relevant.
Yep.
Okay, that's your line.
Yep.
Okay,
We
Brian?
actually have the same thing. So as you approve the app and on install, that information is then passed to us from the apps or such things. That's the information.
Okay, so same.
Same exact model. And it's the model that's accepted by the EMA, right? So it's it's the standard
Yep.
model for the industry.
Okay, what's your line on buying?
On buying, I think that, to be frank, people are naive, and if you think that somebody's building something, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So I think that if people think about things logically, how is somebody making money if they're they're spending all this time building an app, keeping it structured, what are they getting from it? So if you think about it from that standpoint, yes, there are all terms and conditions. I'm sure none of us have ever really sat down and truly read terms and conditions on an app that you do. But when you hit that button, okay, she might have. But when you hit that button,
we get a lot of those people that actually do, probably about 10 to 12 a day, that we get, that want to ask us a question about it and we answer them.
Okay.
I just think that when you agree to open that door and that floodgate, and this is your personal device, I mean, there's so many celebrity scandals about their phone gets hacked or dropped or whatever, and they have naked pictures. Would you put a naked picture in your pocket normally? Obviously, this is a device that we feel really comfortable with. But when we open that door to apps and developers, we're opening that door. And for me, the line is at what are you comfortable sharing? And when you take that risk, what are you doing? So if it was someone that didn't ask, a publisher that didn't ask anyone to sign up for terms and conditions that no one ever reads, I would be against buying it.
So I think aggregate and anonymous, at the end of the day, that's our stance, right? Making sure that everything that we do as AT&T is aggregate and anonymous. And if you think about the device level ID, I don't know that it's John Smith. I know that it's ID 12345. And what we do is then look at moms or we look at people whose mobile contracts are up, and then we aggregate that, and then we use that to deliver audiences. So I think aggregate and anonymous. I think we also obviously AT&T has a much larger business with mobility and other things other than the advertising side. So we're very concerned about not doing anything to alienate the billions and billions of other dollars that are coming in addition to what we're doing. But we actually just did revise the overall AT&T privacy policy to make sure that the consumers did have a place to go to understand what we were doing in an aggregate and anonymous way. And so for someone like you who's concerned about that, you're going to see it, and that's important. And if it's something that you don't want and you're not interested in, you have the option to opt out.
Don't get me wrong, as a buyer, I love it.
No.
I love that everyone looks often.
But
Michelle wants
It's not
both
you.
sides.
Yes.
She wants to buy it, my data, but she doesn't want to give hers.
Because I know what we do with your data.
Yeah, I mean, from a network perspective, we're open source labor publishers and our mentor sources. So we're, we can collect location data from some, we can collect behavioral data from some, we can collect demographic data from some, but it's all grouped together. So if Mallory comes to me and says, I want to know this, I want to buy into this user segment, I say, okay, we can get this much here and this much here, but at the end of the day, it's up to the publishers too. And so when we go out and negotiate on inventory with publishers, it's about how much information we get. Now from the technology platform side, which is our sister company Motion, they're enabling access to publishers that allow it. So once they've gone and vetted and said this is a legal and okay way to track a user or to identify a user or to give the user the ability to opt in, the publisher can allow that. So we're also at the mercy of that as our technology platform to say, do you want to allow, if you want to allow your user, call the, say the publisher is,
But
say it's tiny, that they want to go out and they want to know for their purposes and for the network's purposes who that user is. They can check boxes and enable that. But
Right, so that's for you.
this is not.
Thanks, Ryan. My client's in the back.
But one quick question, how many of you care that they know your gender? Raise your hand, how many of you care that they know your gender? You don't care.
Only
Location.
I don't care
Location.
about
Raise your hand
gender.
if you're bothered that they know your location.
I am.
Okay? What if they don't know who you are? What if they know that you've determined that your income is good or bad? And that's arbitrary. So what if they know your income? Would that bother you? Raise your hand.
We'd all say bad.
See, but it's funny to me because what comes back is you come in the room and people are like, man, unfortunately, they in Prism, everybody's like, you know what? It's already being tracked anyways. So it's like this dirty little secret that we're trying to track a lot of these things and ask those questions, but a lot of people really don't care. So there's certain elements or certain things they don't care about.
I want to get to sort of a specific. Whoever's rooting for you out is rocking right now. So okay, Michael, of everyone on the panel, I believe you may be the only one who your organization has direct access to my credit card, right? I pay my bill with my credit card to AT&T every month. At least most of the time. So here's a hypothetical. So can I, if I have access to, inventory on your network, and I also have, the ability to somehow deliver encrypted, individuals who have spent at my, brand, client, venue, wherever, is there technology that would allow me to take, your database and sort of my customer spend and see did I make an impact there?
Customer spend?
Or, basically, can I use your database to match cookies on, sort of credit card spend data?
So we don't, that doesn't get housed by us. So,
Okay.
we use a secure third party. So, we again, it gets back to the aggregate and anonymous stuff. So, I can know, I can look at levels of credit card data in aggregate and make inferences about delivering ads to an audience. But I can't do a match in terms of, that's privacy. That's not privacy compliant. That's in direct violation of our user agreements and anything like that's very just not something that we're going to be doing.
Okay,
I
perfect.
think that for most of on the panels, we've decided that there's a difference between being anonymous and aggregate, and I think as a consumer and as a planner, I like the idea of being an aggregate because I don't need to know you individually, I need to know what category you fit into, and I think for me, as we go through this, that's where the line is that, if I'm gonna bucket you and I'm gonna put you in bucket 1, 2, 3, 4, I just need to know that. I don't need to know you personally, and I think that's where it is. And even if I'd rather know that, I don't wanna know that your ID number, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you're this age, and you're this place at this time. I'd rather know that you're in my age range, you've been in my place, and you could be there at this time. I think that's key.
Okay. Let me ask this. So measuring success, let's leave clicks off the table for a minute. And let's there's definitely a lot that we can do in the DR space with mobile, right? Whether it's app downloads or some sort of type of mobile commerce or whatever. But let's say on the branding side of life,
Sorry.
2022.
Sorry.
So Jen, you're going to need to talk okay, so measures of success. And Carrie, I want to start with you. You're a network, so that inherently means you see a lot of publishers, you see a lot of campaigns, you see a lot of different kinds of clients. Beyond clicks or some sort of direct response metric, what are they looking for a successful campaign? What do they define as success?
So, I think that's something that we challenge our team internally to determine upfront. Because there's nothing worse than coming to the end of a campaign or mid-campaign saying, I don't have enough clicks or this or that. But I think that the reality is measurement in mobile is better than it was 2 years ago. I think that the ads are becoming more sophisticated and more complex. And we do a lot of rich media campaigns. We do a lot of tablet plus mobile campaigns, and tablet's very different from what you're trying to get from a user than a smartphone. And we're still trying to determine that. But I think the reality is, and we were talking about this earlier, are you trying to drive a mobile video view? Well, why? So if you're trying to drive a mobile video view in the completion, what's the right avenue for that? Or are you trying to get somebody to actually fill out a form? If you're trying to get someone to fill out a form, let's look at a different format for that. We developed a creative alliance a couple of years ago that's just said there's all sorts of 5-step ad units you could use or 2-step ad units you could use. You have to determine that up front. But when you're talking about a smartphone user, actually navigating through a whole 4-step process to get to a point where we helped them to figure out an insurance plan that was right for them. So I think that success in mobile is definitely beyond the click. If you're only looking for a click-through rate, we've all been through that conversation. We can drive click-through rates all day long, and then you should probably just be buying a CPC campaign. But you actually are trying to actually determine what truly you can do with your audience with that space, and did they do it? So will someone really sign up for a full insurance plan? Maybe, maybe not. Will they give you like 3 pieces of information that's the lowest common denominator to develop a lead? Probably. So like you have to work with the partner to figure out what do you really need to do and what's the right format for doing that, and the targeting too. I mean, that all comes into it too, but from an ad unit perspective, there's so much you can do.
So listening to you talk, I'm gonna change my question actually after listening to you talk. So you had it easy. For the other 4, okay, hold on.
We want an answer, we want an answer.
For the other 4, so this is what you're making me think. Okay, clicks aside, how do you prove that your impression was worth it? Like, how do we do that in the mobile space, right? I think most of us in the
Send gift baskets.
Send gift
What's that?
Picnic plan.
So no, I think you did.
So we've developed, and this is again a location area.
Yep.
So we've developed a whole new measurement on, clients that are coming to us and say, we need something better than click-through rate. So we went back and thought about this, and we took the technology and we reverse engineered it. We came up with something called PVR, place visit rate. And it simply adds, it's the number of people who visit the destination over the number of impressions I served to that targeted audience. And so
So
you're
are you
basically,
sending people to that destination?
yeah, so we're actually driving people into, and the way we've measured this is we've actually used satellite data to draw what we call polygons. We basically hand outlined the rooftops of all the major big box stores, Walmart's, Targets, major grocery chains, airports, hotels, stadiums. And so we can actually see when the phone shows up inside that polygon. And we measure that back to, did we serve this phone an ad? And if so, look at the rate of inference, whether or not they've actually arrived.
But then did they buy something?
Pardon me?
Did they buy something?
Well,
That doesn't really matter.
But-
That wasn't your goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to get them there.
I think we have to agree that that's pretty awesome, right?
It's-
That's,
I mean, no, that's.
That's
yeah.
the next step, though, is right. Is now can we layer on the sale data
Sure.
and get to that point? But I mean,
I want to interject. I think the reality is mobile creates an advantage that hasn't been there before, okay? Some lawyer wants to say, call us at 665-226 right now so we can go do whatever. You have to actually create an action for people to do, right? And you see it on radio, you see it on television. Mobile, it's a little easier versus even the web. I mean, web used to have these panel of ads all down the side and on the top. It looked like a NASCAR page, right? And our NASCAR driver all got their ads all over. And the fact is you want some sort of action. So we have implemented, click targets, right? But the reality is it still comes down to you want to ask them to do something. And the great thing about mobile is with one click, they can make a call. With one click, they can make an email. With one click, they can get an address. And it can do that, which they can't do on the web. Now, calculating whether that was effective or not is a different challenge. I think we're
so how do you
dealing
guys
with
prove it then? Like, how do you prove that the impression was worth it?
I mean, we prove it by saying here they've clicked all 4 of these items, right? But the reality is it still doesn't close the sale. The reality, I just come down to saying we're asking them to do something.
Okay.
And I think right now we are in its earliest stage of that, and I think it's going to get more advanced.
Okay.
But that's better than what they were getting before.
Fair enough. Mallory.
But I think Mallory brought up earlier too, like attribution. I mean, you've seen it on TV, you've seen it at the bus. What did you call it? The bus?
The bus station.
Bus station.
Oh yeah, bus coverage.
The what?
and that's huge
I don't know.
It's at the bus stop.
I mean,
Yeah.
and I like the bathroom stall stuff. I mean, you've seen it everywhere. At what point then did you serve it into mobile where they acted? Or was it actually relevant to what they were doing in mobile too? And I think that that doesn't happen overnight. That takes some time, it takes some research and figuring out. But if you can figure out who your user, if you're targeting, I keep using moms, and I'm not a mom, but if mom's finally got the baby out for a nap and she can actually finally act on this, when is that for her specifically, and how do you know that?
a great measurement, but all of those measurements are in 3 or 4 clicks. They're all really specific to an execution, and it really goes back to what you said in the beginning before you even posed the question to validate the impression is, how do we decide what's valuable? And it really comes from us knowing up front, us as the media people, when we go to a publisher, to know what our goal is. And you know what, I would love to say, hey, you guys could make my job easier if you could give me all the back-end analytics, but maybe for me, if it's driving engagement with my site, it's making sure that I set up the site properly to know where everything's coming from. So I think that it really, like, that ball can fall in different courts, and I would love to pass the buck and say that if they all give me better analytics all the time, my campaigns could be 1,000% more successful. My campaigns would increase, but I think that's part on me, and I think, you know, I just did a campaign with a client called named McGuire's, and Place IQ was a part of that buy, and so was Majiva, to be honest. But we were able to prove ROI in store by looking at where we served impressions throughout a campaign, and actually look at that sales data and match that back. We had markets that were dark as well, and that's totally outside of what you could look at on your ad. So how do I evaluate that one of those impressions, you know, drove somebody to the store to actually make that purchase? I'm not sure, to be honest, but I know that my ads made a difference because overall, and to look at it in an aggregate, the impressions where I had the most mobile media, or the markets where I had the most mobile media, were the most successful.
And Craig, I would throw back to it a little bit and say, do you know enough about your mobile audience to say, this is what I know they're gonna do when, so I need you to drive more actions to them there.
Sure.
Too, because as a salesperson, it's really frustrating to talk to a buyer who hasn't done that research up front or hasn't gone through that and just simply takes their metrics and goals from their online or from their TV or combines and I need you to drive 25,000 people to watch this video in this $50,000 budget.
Yeah.
You know, so what have we done up front as marketers to say this is where we know what, and you know we need you to really.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I have 2 more questions. And
I mean, there was a question from Twitter earlier, but it was way down on the list, so I want to see if they want to ask in person,
Yeah.
so they can get a free drink. So Greg, would you like to ask your question?
Jones?
A lot of good show off you must have.
Do you remember what it was? It was a little while ago.
We could scroll. Can you
Well,
scroll?
if the answer's fat fingers, I think we saw it. Okay, so for everybody,
Ski tardy,
um,
Greg Jones.
so just on a very high level, mobile, what are we doing right? What are
I
we
saw
doing
that
wrong?
question.
Yeah, what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, and what can we change?
What about fat fingers?
Other than evolve to skinny fingers or better opposable thumbs, but just your thoughts, go.
Let's go rapid fire. Ryan, you want to start? Or actually, Mallory, you get the mic.
Oh, I don't have any.
All right.
Nothing like getting hammered.
Right, wrong, fat fingers. Let's go.
I think that the beauty of mobile is that it's mobile, right? We carry it around with it. I think we said earlier, we've got it in our hands, right? So to me, understanding location is the absolute key. It's why I left the agency role after 16, 18 years actually, and joined Place IQ, because the location was the way to define the audience. If we didn't have location, right, it would just be the tiny internet.
Okay. The tiny internet, I love that.
It is a tiny area.
I use it all the time.
A news app on a screen the size of Rhode Island.
I have not.
It's not easy. It's not, and put an ad, because you're all trying to struggle with the whole banner ad thing, right? Everybody's tired of banners. That's why we implement interstitials, full screen ones. I think the things we're doing right are the fact that we're spending time there and starting to try things. The bad part is I don't think the budgets reflect that. That's the thing we're doing wrong. I think you're totally 5 years late to the prom, folks, if you're not spending money in mobile. And I'll just be absolutely clear, because guess what? We see it. Whatever happens in Texas right now, I can tell you we see a 47% spike in the state of Texas entirely with 17 news properties, and that's where people are.
Reacting to our client saying, do this, or we're a single person reacting to an agency client saying, do this. I think we need to be more proactive in saying, what is it we're doing and what are the avenues to get there? So I challenge, I think mostly of your agency people out there, any direct brand marketers, and this isn't for me to come and attack you afterward, or you guys back there. But I think from the marketer standpoint, challenge your agency to not just go out and vet everything, but to actually bring to you that are challenging the metrics you're looking for and what you're trying to do versus the tactical, I'm hearing about this and I've heard this is possible and I'm seeing that. And from the agency perspective, don't just make your salesperson go and answer the question, can you do this, can you do that, do you do this, do you do that? Ooh, well, the competitors do, so what does that make you? So I think that we really need to get to the root of who is that mobile consumer. So I think that's what we're doing wrong, is reacting. And then what I think we're doing right is that so many incredible brands, big and small, are taking huge leaps of faith in this industry, whether it's big takeovers with publishers or whether it's scalable rich media things that are running that people are responding to. You know, that we've seen more and more award submissions in mobile that are really cool and things to be proud of as an industry, that you guys as agency people are getting your clients to say, we're gonna put the money there and do it. So I think continue to take those risks, but be smart about how you ask about them and don't react.
We actually have a non-Twitter question over here.
Wait,
And
I
then
don't
there's-
understand.
I know. And then it looks like there's a bunch of questions, so here you go.
Sorry, I'm delayed, not tweeting during the event. You guys have kind of touched on this, but at a more fundamental level, when you're talking to clients, when you look at paid media and mobile versus other mediums, it's pretty tiny. Why aren't they releasing more budgets? Because when you kind of think back to the first slide, which shows time spent versus ad spend, or all the things you've talked about on how engaged the consumer is with their device, why aren't marketers moving faster?
So
Go ahead, no.
Well, I'm inclined to just ask if there are client-side friends in the room that would want to take a stab at that. I think all of us probably are with you. That.
But I want to ask a question with that. How many of you people watch live television anymore? Raise your hand.
Sports.
Okay?
Not including sports.
Not including
Reruns.
sports. Yeah, that's true. Not including sports. Look at that number. Guess what, people? Budgets are being thrown to live television all over the place that's non-sport related.
Because
Who's
it's
watching
easy.
it? Who's watching it?
So hey, now
It's easy.
is that a generational thing? Or is that like fact for everyone?
It's changed. It's really intriguing to me. So when you start to look at it and then you see this data now, there was just some research that came out that said for newspapers and television broadcast. So newspapers could always bank, we have a lot of newspaper clients, could bank on the fact that 55 and older was their largest subscriber, right? Because they're going to paywall. Guess what? They have less people subscribing to print newspaper now than they have people actually watching the digital, utilizing the digital now. That's a pretty scary number if you're a newspaper. You're host.
So Michael, you rep all three sides, right? So
We all know that.
I guess what are you seeing? And if there are clients in the room who are bold enough and have an answer, like why is it hard to spend digital dollar or mobile dollars? I would love to hear that. But
I mean, just
I'm not a client, but I have an idea.
Go.
I do too. It's difficult. It was difficult to go into digital because it couldn't just be about the ad. It wasn't a broadcast medium. You had to account for people responding to your ad and what's the user experience and what are they going to do after that and how are you going to track it? You can't just reach frequency it because that's the worst measure ever because there's no real reach frequency. So it's just more complicated. It's difficult. You can't just say, I'm going to spend more money in mobile. You have to put money into production. You have to put money into UX. You have to put money into your mobile experience,
Yeah, but I think
your social.
We've made it more difficult, right? Because I mean, you think about TV, you still got to spend a crap load of money on a commercial.
Because it's easy.
It's easy because it's a 30-second ad. You know that there's a standard set. And the problem is the standards today for mobile are all over the place. We know this because we went IAB. And guess what? We realized IAB standards suck. Absolutely, people. Sorry to tell you. So we did a full interstitial ad that blends in between the app because we realized, guess what? It's not right because what they did is they tried to throw web ads over and just then throw it over. So we're in the infancy. I think that's part of it.
Michael, I think you were.
I don't know. You know, I mean, think about are we all gonna? I mean, we all think Nielsen has it. I mean, Nielsen's not great, right, from a TV measurement perspective. It's measuring diaries. I mean, it's a small sample, but everyone buys into it, right? Because there's, TV's easy to buy and it's been around a long time. And I think it takes, I think Carrie said something. I mean, the questions. Look, I mean, whether I'm talking to a buyer or I'm talking to another seller or I'm talking to a technology vendor or internal, the amount of granular questions that people expect and want, it's crazy, but bless you. It's crazy. And I just think, no one's asking those questions in TV, and I think we take it for granted that we can actually have the technical wherewithal to track these things, but what does it really mean? Right? Is it gonna get us where we need to get? What happened to good creative? What happened to reaching a good audience and go down and try to prove a metric?
And I would say from a political standpoint within your organizations too, CMOs are not that comfortable talking about mobile. And heads of the agencies are not that comfortable because they're up here figuring out organizational issues and people that are doers are learning it all and they know more. And Mindshare developed a program. Brian, do you remember what it's called?
What program are you referring to?
Where they took, like, junior people in the agency were tasked with learning audience, video, mobile, social. And it was like this upside down triangle where they went out and educated the managing directors of the agencies.
Oh, because the mentor program, it's a center of excellence, but the idea was that the junior staff trains the senior staff on how
Right.
this cool, hip technology works.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot to be said for that within agencies and within the corporate organizations where the 20 to 30-year-olds are actually doing this and understand it and get it and can get it faster. And your CMOs and your managing directors of the agencies are a little bit freaked out about it because it's just not in their day-to-day. They don't use iPhones. They're still kind of just getting used to their BlackBerries. So I think from just a completely different point of view, there's a lot of education to be done there to make them comfortable because when your CMO is being asked about mobile, they can talk very high level about it, but they don't understand what's truly going on from an audience perspective, a measurement perspective, a content perspective, a channel perspective, targeting, all of that in technology. So I think that as people that are doing this all day long, I think this is cool and easy and fun. Like, I challenge you guys to get up there and really help them understand it because once they do, the budgets are going to start to get approved a whole lot faster. But we know how CMOs work. I mean, I don't think that many. But I think that that's a big barrier because it's a cultural thing. People are starting to talk about Snapchat. This didn't come up in this conversation, but like Snapchat freaks the heck out of people right now. But yet it's this big trending topic of this new format of media that disappears.
It's much better to have a picture in your pocket.
Exactly. And like that's the future, So I think there's an educational level at the top who approves these budgets, and we're starting to see that shift because it's taking longer for mobile budgets to get approved because CMOs are actually saying we need mobile on this plan, but wait, I need to understand it. It takes a little longer to catch on, but there's not just like little budgets flying and getting approved under the radar.
2014 is the year of mobile.
Here's a loaded.
Or the CMO.
Here's a loaded question, but I think it's worth asking. So, in my experience, mobile budgets come from digital, right? You take your entire digital budget, and then a part of it that would have gone to desktop now goes mobile. Is that right?
No.
Okay, where should it come from?
I have an interjection into that
TV.
actually.
Why? Why should it come from TV?
Because I think there are.
Just ask the question. Nobody's watching it anymore.
Right. I
Yes,
actually
they
would
are.
like to
There's
diversify
time
that
shifting
question
it.
and ask you,
Yeah.
so if you have desktop and mobile, which we've all been talking about, but what about mobile web? So that's another thing that we haven't even discussed yet, but for me personally, I have to always look at mobile app versus mobile web, desktop. So maybe you guys could speak more to that as well. I don't want to.
I mean, as far as app and mobile web, I look at them as the same. I don't look at them as different. I look at how you interact on your mobile device. Yes, the tracking is different as
Yeah.
far as what I said earlier about being able to track in and out of app. So it's really what I'm looking for, but I look at them as an aggregate, but I think both supplement. So if you have digital content or, a lot of apps that are still successful because how many times are they opened once and never used again?
Yep.
A lot of apps that are still are successful are tied to something that is also relevant. So maybe my Bravo TV's app, and I'm tied to that TV. So I think that's why I look at the 360 of how it's all approached. But if I get my news on New York Times, I may look at New York Times website because I may not have their app. So I don't think that they should be separated. I think that they should be looked at as one. But I also think that everything should be looked at as one. I just think to hit the conversation of why it's not all looked at that way and why budgets are divided. I've been there, I've been on the traditional side. I'll be blunt again since I already said the patient pocket comment. Traditional people are scared shitless that we're gonna take all their dollars, so they are worried on overeducating their client on something like that. They might have that relationship, they're terrified. They don't realize, they don't look at it as a 360. Being in their boat, I won't say everybody, I don't mean to generalize, but I've been there. And part of the reason I switched over to mobile is I thought, I'm not gonna have a job in 10 years. If I make myself an expert in this, why don't I make myself an expert in something that's more relevant? And so it's not just comfort levels on the CMO level, which it absolutely, that's where it comes from, but it's comfort levels all over. And I think that the splicing and dicing of let's split hairs and say what's mobile app and what's mobile web and what's desktop and this, I think that if we all looked at everything on a little bit more of a 360 approach and how do we supplement each other and which one is right for that situation instead of, I worked on big movies where we said, okay, upfront they would say 15% of this budget is going to be mobile, and 20% of this budget is going to be digital, and 75% of this budget is going to be this. I know I just made over 100, but it's okay. But it's just like why without looking at the audience and the content and who we're trying to reach, do we separate it out in percentages? Let's look at them and decide what's the best approach. And maybe we sit down together, and I do this with my teams at FRWD. Like they come up to me and say, "Hey, Mallory, this is where we are. We're thinking about adding mobile. Why are we adding mobile? Am I really the best avenue to do that? Are you really the best avenue to do that? How do we approach this better as a thing?" And I don't think, splitting it down and saying this is a percentage. And I think that's a comfort level too of like, let's put in a spreadsheet that this much money is going to this. And I think it's really, we need to approach it from the consumer standpoint that we all talked about earlier, of the need state and say, how do you best reach this consumer?
But even
And
if you're
what's my
taking the
grand goal?
360 approach and yet within digital, so, we're lucky enough to have a great 360 approach on the campaign that I handle. But even within digital, I'm speaking on a more granular level of, let's say you are the New York Times and 30% of your traffic is coming from mobile web, and then you have app, and then you have desktop,
Well, I asked Carrie the right questions, and then she tells me how to reach my audience the best.
Okay, so I want Michael.
But I can give you that data though. I mean, right now, no, I can give you that data because if you do mobile app development and we do mobile web.
Before you do, I want Michael to back up explain that the mobile dollars should come from TV. I want to know how we convince CMOs of that. And then I think, Brian, you
It's the same question.
okay, so
So it's not an either or. I think this is where data and data cross-screens come into play. So if you think about, I'll just make it about AT&T, but there are about 5 or 6 other companies who are getting into this space. So you take the set-top box data, right? We know in an aggregate way the people who are watching Vampire Diaries, right? And it's not maybe it's not just, right? So maybe it's not just, it's probably not just, females 18 to 25, right? There's some male pockets in there, there's some older, there's a whole bunch. So we can actually look at those audiences on a set-top box data level and not only find those like audiences in online and mobile, but because we own the subscribers, we can actually do a percentage of that in an addressable fashion. So I think the benefit, why I say it's not either or, television is amazing, right? I don't think anyone would argue that it's never going to go away. But how do we tap into the consumer's behavior on TV to help to make our mobile buys better, to make our online buys better? So, I think to go to a mobile buyer and help them educate them how they should actually learn about TV rather than saying it's just mobile and mobile's different. We should be educating you on the mobile side of how you can leverage TV. And I think that's an interesting way, and obviously you can go to the TV folks and do the same thing, and if they're scared, then fine, right? They're not thinking strategically about what they need to do to go with consumer behavior.
awesome. Brian?
This is not to
All
say.
right, just real quick, we should have 2 more questions, and then we should wrap it up.
So this is not to say we don't need mobile experts or mobile specialists, right? But I think the progressive agencies are starting to look at things the way I mentioned earlier, right? Is it video, is it text, or image-based, or is it audio? I mean, this year, I think, was the first year we saw the TV upfront buyers go in there and actually buying digital video along with their TV, and that includes mobile, right? So I think that the idea of where's this budget coming from, those silos should be breaking down, and it should be thinking about what's the best channel for delivering this piece of content. And I think that we're getting there. I think it's actually moving in that direction. It may not be moving as fast as we want it to be going there, you know, but it's certainly, this year, more than any, it's definitely going in the right way.
Well said. Well said. Any more questions from the crowd? Right all night long, but
Last chance.
you ask a question, you get to drink.
You do. Or you can just butter me up after.
There were some Twitter questions.
So actually, Barrett
Oh,
asked,
Twitter questions.
yeah, Barrett asked on Twitter, kind of
Yes.
behavior between mobile and tablet. Did you ask
Yeah,
that?
well, I mean, you guys have been talking a lot about not being so siloed in a device approach and looking at the consumer first, but if you take a step back, consumers use devices differently. So if you're looking at the device behavior between smartphone and tablet, there's obviously unique opportunities for strategy and targeting and engagement and content. So what are your POVs on differentiating those subsegments of channels? Okay.
Carrie?
How did you describe yourself, the nerd, earlier?
Fucking tech geek or whatever.
Yeah.
Eloquent.
So,
Thank you. Sorry.
Keep it classy.
Yeah.
Hey,
no, so actually, Rajiv,
sorry.
Tom, can you quote this for PR, please? We launched a tablet network last year, and you could argue the tablet network is just the same as the smartphone network, but it's our tablet inventory. But the reason we did is we went through an entire, I think it's actually almost a 2-year process with Vivicky in this pool, and we studied this tablet lane, and we went through and said, okay, tablet consumer at the time, this was pre-iPad mini, so a tablet was still in the price range of $300 to $500, $600 if you wanted network. Anyway, so we went through a big study around what is a tablet consumer going to be beyond just the mobile consumer, because it is that lean back environment. And not only did we learn more behavioral differences about a tablet user, we learned about what else they're doing while they're on their tablet, what they're doing that they don't have time for on their smartphone, what they're doing in conjunction with their smartphone and their television. And we have been out there now in the market for the last almost a year now, talking to marketers about the fact that the tablet strategy, it's time to break that out. So while mobile is still so new, also you've got to look at the tablet strategy. And some agencies and some clients are actually looking at tablet strategy from their broadcast budget. And Paramount being one, and I don't think that that's private knowledge. The broadcast team is planning for tablet because they're seeing that as their second screen.
Yeah.
And mobile is totally different. So the tablet consumer is different. And not only is the tablet consumer different from mobile, but it's very much closely aligned with your television consumer. So a lot of content providers and a lot of television networks have developed apps and tools and games and sweepstakes because they know for a fact that I think it's 55% of users who are watching TV have some other device in the room, and half of those are actually tablets. And travel clients can see so much success in a tablet because they're marketing their beautiful beaches and such on television, and you're finally home at 7 o'clock with your glass of wine and your significant other, and you're planning your trip, and they're very successfully measuring ROI for that. So it is a very different device, and while from a technology perspective, it's very close to the smartphone. So delivering the ads and what rich media can you run, what targeting can you do, that's very similar to a smartphone because of the operating systems and because of the environment that it's running in. The behavioral usage is very closer, it's closely aligned with the at-home television consumer. So it's very important to look at that strategy differently than smartphone.
Well said. Craig, any more questions from the crowd?
Last chance. Anyone? I have one last question.
Okay, so can we just, again, lightning round. We talked a lot about how specific we can get, how location aware we can be, how much we know about our users, okay? So from a creative perspective, can you guys give just like a rock star example? And I'm sorry we don't have, like examples to put up on the screen, but like, who's just killing it on using smart context to inform the actual ad itself? Brian, do you want to start, and we're just going to go lightning round?
I would say take a look at some of the circular work that's going on out there. They're looking at location to drive which piece of products they should be putting into circular first, and I think that's some really cool stuff that we're seeing.
E-circulars, okay? So from like the big boxes?
There's some big box of stuff, some of the work with Stop Local, things like that.
Okay. So how are they using like context? What are they doing?
So they're using location to say, all right, this is someone who we know has been in a sporting event 3 times last month. They're a fitness person, so let's give them a sporting apparel ad first, as opposed to some of the other offers that are in the circular that week.
Awesome. Wade?
Go ahead and plead the fifth. I don't think it's even remotely even there. I mean, I've seen the circular stuff, and these guys, we put it with the Boston Globe. I mean, those are big clients, man.
Yeah.
We deal with them, and what we've seen is it's all guesswork they're throwing out there right now, and they're trying stuff. I think we're still in. Well, it is because the results aren't very good, and guess what? They're all trying to throw a boatload of money in and trying to figure it out. They are. I mean, I know. I'm dealing with it. I see the dollars coming in, and it ain't very pretty. It ain't very pretty.
So what about your stadium? Somebody was, why do people want to get only the people who are in the stadium?
From a hyper-local perspective, we do because we deal with local, properties. KCP's a client of ours. They're selling some hyper-local stuff with Fleet Farm, and they're having success with that. That they can do it at a store level, and they can get you right down where the closest store is. But I still think we're in its infancy to really the relevance of that. I mean, we're not at the level of like an Uber where the black car drives up where you're at, right? You're not seeing it in real time where the guy said, oh, I saw the ad, I'm driving all the way to your store, and I can see it come right, and I can see you come right in. Well, by the way, you're here. Guess what? We got a discount for you. I mean, we're not there yet. Okay. Will we be? I think so.
Okay. All right.
I also believe that it needs to evolve a lot, but I really like the idea of dynamic ads and being able to change your context based on where your user is or when they receive it or what else they're looking at, which is a little bit about what he's saying about e-circulars and just taking that through. I think for me that's one of the technologies that's most exciting.
What was the question?
Who's still using the context that you get, the data you
Well,
get?
they got an answer right before they post it.
Whatever Wade said.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm a big user and just I'm passionate about Foursquare, so I think they're continuing to innovate in this and get it right, at least from a publisher perspective.
Sure.
And I think from a creative perspective, I don't know. I tend to think those clients who are really looking for engagement metrics and actually wanting people to interact with amazing creative, amazing video, games, store locators, to keep them engaged. And Levi's is a great example of trying to getting women to select the kind of jeans based on their bodies, and then in the app drive to H&M or drive to retail stores to purchase it, and then get there and check in Foursquare all through the app. One of their brand with us. So I think that kind of stuff's really fun if it's an engagement metric.
Okay. Carrie, so your awesome answer.
Yeah, it's not as awesome.
Super cool, rich media, dynamic. What's going on?
I mean, the couple of stuff I see is like some of the most crazy brands. They're like, what? Like, Tom, do you want to know about Tom's bar?
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for some people.
I mean, we're seeing so many crazy brands decide to do some cool stuff, and maybe it's because the sales people, but like CPG or pharma, where you have to get really creative and really cool to talk about something. J&J, J3, they're taking dynamic information about the weather, and actually autos are doing this too, where it's snowing and suddenly the ad is dynamically pulling in the fact that the weather element is relevant, and you're in Minneapolis where it is snowing. Granted, it happens when it's not like
Actually, yeah, it's snowing
breeze.
outside.
That would be amazing. But like just combining the fact that this is still your brand, but I'm gonna pull in some really surprising attributes to this ad unit, and it's dynamic to who I am. And everything we've seen in retail too. Burberry did this too, where they would pull in whatever weather it was according to your phone and when the ad showed. Is it cold? Is it windy? I'm gonna show you my trench coat versus my bathing suit. I don't know. And so I think that there's some surprising brands that are willing to go out there and do things think CPG, I think some pharma companies are doing cool things, and then retail is doing a lot that.
Crazy brands, cool
Well,
stuff.
a lot of,
Maybe that's the
yeah.
takeaway. Awesome.
Tom Stoller here, he sold the campaign disinfect paste, and he likes to talk about that.
Well, David Herman's expense account is about to run out. Let's wrap it up. Let's give a big hand to our panelists. And to AT&T AdWorks, to DoApp, to Mojiva, and to PlaceIQ. Let's drink.
We have a couple announcements. We have giveaways. So we are giving away like really cool stuff right after this. Go out here, you must put your business card in the bag or bucket or whatever each person is collecting them in if you would like to win. But really, really cool prizes we're giving away. And then next month is our first annual island party that will be on Harriet Island. We will have gambling, there will be a DJ, it's gonna go very late, it'll be inside and outside. And of course, free drinks and food, it will be great. That's coming up in August. Thanks everybody.